Hey there, everyone. Greetings. It is GleeCon, and I am back. I am bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Happy to be here. Stoked. I'm on the countdown until Christmas for myself. Gonna take some time off. So I am looking forward to that most definitely. Monday in the books. We got 4 more days, and we'll have 5 episodes between now and then. I do not plan on taking any time off. We might miss one on the weekend leading up to, depending on how busy things get. You know how it can get, last minute Christmas stuff. Something might sneak in. But I'm going to try my darndest. On the last episode, we continued to play through Duskwood. I kind of think we did it with Callie. I honestly can't remember because I do both. Actually, it might have been Erator, and then it was. We continued the investigation. He killed some Worgen. He killed some. I'm keeping my eye on the basketball. There's a basketball game right now that I was watching. That's 9 seconds left. My team is up by 2 points, so just kind of keeping an eye out on that. Score, 5 seconds to go. Oh, we got a foul. So we got up by 3 with 5 seconds to go. So can the defense hold firm? But Erator's defense definitely did. He just continues to crush it. He killed ogres. He killed some Defius, and then he continued to run down a dream, a mystery, and he is up by 4. We ended up with wetlands, so when we pick up with Callie, she'll be picking the adventure up. There's a couple little things that we have to do in the wetlands next time. We've also been reading through the World of Warcraft official magazine. We're on the 5th issue. It's the first issue of the 2nd volume. It's the final issue. They don't know that. And they had planned to do this as comic series called Warcraft Saga. I'm looking forward to it. It's written by, as you can see, Chris Metzen, art Alex Horley, scripting James Waugh. I don't know the difference between scripting and writing when you're talking comics, but let's dive in. On the last episode we looked at the sound crafting, how they make the sound and the voice in the game, and it was an interesting article. But stay a while and listen as the Warcraft Saga Chapter 1 gets kicked off. Come on, this is the longest 5 seconds of my life. The nail biter. Let me refresh and see if anything gets put in the books here. No, they're just going to make me. I'm a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, and this is a unique experience in my life. I've never, ever seen a season like this where we are just crushing it. It's crazy. I've been a fan of the Timberwolves longer than I've been a fan of the Vikings. I was into basketball a lot more when I was younger, probably from the time I was like 10 or 11. I suck. I'm old now. I might play horse with the kids or whatever. I don't, but I do like it a lot. 1 second, still up by 4. We're pretty safe unless they get a 3 and we foul them or something like that. So we can probably say, yep, that's it. In the books, got another win, and they are tied with the Celtics for the lead of the NBA, and they are easily 4-game lead up in their own division. So things are looking great for the old Timberwolves. Sorry for an aside there. I just didn't want to be distracted. I didn't want to start this story and then look over to that, but that's a good dub there. Okay. It is said that in the beginning, there was light and there was void, and in a long time ago, the two collided in the abyss of the great dark. And here we have a picture of that light and void colliding. Infinite worlds spiraled out into the newly forming cosmos, worlds that would one day bear life forms of wondrous and terrible diversity. In time, powerful beings arose and set about bringing order and shape to the nascent universe. These colossal entities were known as the Titans. And it's actually things are so cyclical in World of Warcraft because the Titans, I think, are going to be a big part of the story in the trilogy of games coming up. Unfathomable mortal minds, the truth of these great galactic beings has long been lost as whispers begat legends, and legends turned to myth. We know many, if not most of them. Oh, they're gonna name it for us. Ruling over the Titans was an elite sect known as the Pantheon. From left to right, there's Norgannon, the Dreamweaver. He's got that disc there, the discs of Norgannon, keeper of celestial magics and lore. Khaz'goroth, the fiery guy here, the shaper or forger of worlds. Golganneth, the thunderer, lord of skies and roaring oceans in the background there. Aenar, the lifebinder, gentle caretaker of all living things. You can encounter her quite a bit in the game. Agramar, the Avenger, lieutenant of the great Sargeras. Poor guy, he's dead in the Pantheon. Aman'Thul, the High Father of the Pantheon, probably on the next page, that's him. And Sargeras, the defender and noblest of them all. And now we know he is, of course, the evilest of them all, the most evil. During the first ages of creation, the Titans explored the newborn universe. They crafted worlds of infinite beauty, raising massive mountains and dredging vast seas. They breathed skies and raging atmospheres into being. And there's a picture of the kind of helpers, actually, like the earthen, and there's the frost giants. Finally, the Pantheon empowered primitive races to tend to its works and maintain the integrity of their respective worlds. The future seemed bright, assured, yet a great shadow loomed. From an ethereal dimension of warring magics known as the Twisting Nether came legions of ravenous demonic beings. These demons had but one malevolent purpose, to destroy life and devour the energies of the living universe. There's Sargeras, the champion of the Titans, was elected to hunt down the demonic armies. He carried out his duty proudly and vowed never to rest until the demons' evil blight had been eradicated from existence. Regardless, no matter how hard Sargeras fought, the multitudes would not relent, maddeningly raising 10 worlds to everyone wrested from their grasp. Yet the demons' greatest victory was still to come. And this is like Chronicles 101 here that we've read. Sargeras, the most heralded of all Titans, could no longer bear the harsh truth that wherever he turned, evil and depravity saturated the whole of creation. He ceased the futility of his war and joined the very demonic armies he once had striven to annihilate. Now he leads the forces of what is known as the Burning Legion. As they rage across the stars seeking out worlds to destroy and the very noblest of hearts to corrupt, there's the Nathrezim, until all the universe is undone. That's it. That's the whole first episode. Well, that's a bummer. It's almost like a preview. It's not really a comic at all. All right, so let's get into an actual article. It's called Macro Machines, and it's all about using macros in the game. Customize and optimize the powers of Azeroth. Sure, you understand your spell rotation. Your heals all land at the right time, and your tanking leaves bosses trembling with despair, but are you really getting everything you can out of your spells and abilities? If you want to take things to the next level, then you have to think big. Think macros. Macros are the next step in improving your game, says Talanova Nordrasil US. They let you have more control over your abilities, which in turn lets you manage things better. Macros don't stop at spells and abilities, though. As one of World of Warcraft's most customizable options, this basic form of scripting allows you to unleash a combination of spells, targeting options, emotes, and chat commands with one click. New to macros? Check out our beginner's guide on page 73. A macro is a way of performing a sequence of actions, says James Whitehead II. Normally, if you wanted to do two things in a row, you would need to perform both actions manually. A macro lets you combine that to a single action. James, the author of World of Warcraft Programming, a guide and reference for creating WoW add-ons, has played the game from the beginning and over the years has watched the role of macros change. I think initially they were a passing feature, something most users wouldn't bother with, but now they've become a very powerful way of performing scripted actions and changing the behavior of the action bars. I'm not really, I gotta say, this is where it separates me from the truly good at the game. I don't really use them very much. The only time I ever use macros is when I'm trying to get tricky achieves, or I'm hunting for rares, sort of like my own version of the rare find add-on. For instance, I can think of there's an achievement where you have to jump and get so many points in the not the Norwegian estate, whatever the Norrington estate, what in BFA, this horse thing where you have to jump and lance and shoot these blimps. And it's very, very tough to get the high score that needed for the final achievement for it. But you can make a macro that essentially makes every time you jump, you are shooting a blimp if it's there, and just little things like that. So little macros that I made, but I just make up my own. Whatever I think, I wish one key would do all of these things. Whether it's PvP or PvE, macros can optimize and add functionality to targeting, spell rotations, and situational encounters, providing efficiency and the upper hand. Okay, taking aim. In modern raids, battlegrounds, and arenas, you have to assess and react to multiple targets, ensuring that the right actions are taken against the appropriate parties. Clicking through targets with the mouse is one option, but this is a big challenge. Macros can alleviate some of the challenge by offering more intuitive choices through 3 different commands: focus, mouse over, and player-specific targeting. Setting a focus on an enemy or another player essentially doubles your targeting ability. If someone isn't using their focus target and doesn't have macros for that target, they really should, says Jack Insko, co-founder of Arena Junkies, where he goes under the name Rapture. It opens up a lot of options in both PvP and PvE. You can maintain a primary target, say DPSing a raid boss, while also keeping an ad crowd controlled. Without a macro, it would be necessary to change your target from the raid boss to the ad to recast polymorph, thus slowing your DPS. However, by creating a macro that automatically casts polymorph on the focus target, you don't have to drop your primary target. Using /cast at focus polymorph, cast a spell on the focus, and if there isn't a focus target, it will cast it on your primary target. This basic script can be altered for other classes, such as a rogue using kick on their focus target. Okay, that's interesting. If you need more control and flexibility, mouse over targeting is the way to go. Mouse over macros are extremely helpful, says Bramalojo, Azara US. For instance, if you are a hunter, use cast target mouse over Wyvern Sting. If you're attacking someone in PvP but the healer keeps healing them, it gets a little annoying, I know. With this on the action bar, place the mouse over the priest, hit the button, and there you go. Betty by priest without having to change targets. Alandastar Blackhand US turns it into a healer macro with a few more features by expanding on Bramalojo's example, cast mouse over help rejuvenation. This ensures the mouse over target is friendly and provides a backup. The empty brackets will target your current target, in case there is no mouse over target. With just a few small changes, a hunter DPS macro morphs into a druid healer macro. Mouse overs make point-and-click tasks quick and easy to get creative. I think if I really, really, really wanted to get that competitive with it, I'd get into that. Probably my favorite general-purpose macro is a 2-part system, says Nevin Flanagan, who plays as Alistane on Bloodhoof US. The macro is simply focus mouse over. Then I keybind it to my middle mouse button so I can point at a mob or player and instantly make them my focus by middle clicking. This is incredibly fast and useful for cases where I have to do crowd control. Raid and party leaders can jump off from here to create raid icons on mouse overs. I mean, to a small extent, I do have my trigger key on my mouse. It's kind of like a third mouse button. It's not my center key because my mouse doesn't have it, but I guess it's probably equivalent to that. I just have that bound to the tab button, so it allows me to quickly tab through in combat. I do like that. Target mouse over run set raid target 5. Bind this to a key and choose a raid symbol 1 to 8 for a quick raid icon dispersal, or build multiple macros to mark a group of mobs. So yeah, there's that. And nowadays, there's just so many add-ons that do a lot of the bulk of this for you. That's also why I don't really do it. Whenever I really want it, I could just get an add-on. These examples allow for a lot of flexibility in targeting, but sometimes the intent of the macro requires a single unchanging target. Try setting the target as a friend's name or player position. Use target Garak, Dense Ember Silk Bandage. Or Garak could be replaced by Party X, where X is replaced with a numeral of a player's position. It can even be extended to NPCs, Nevin points out. One that I used to get a lot of use out of was target Jandis Barov for Skullmans. She creates dozens of illusions of herself and makes everyone untarget her when she does, but since the copies are named Illusion of Jandis Barov, you could use that macro to quickly pick out the real one. Makes sense. Decoding a macro's logic. So this is basic. This is just like Script Speak 101. A breakdown of a complex macro reveals that it is simply a series of commands. For additional resources, check out Wowpedia, WowWiki, and the UI and macro forums on the official World of Warcraft community site. Yeah, so if you have any experience doing even light coding at all, macros really aren't very tough. So /cast will cast your spell Rejuvenation. Can also start with use for items such as bandages. Okay, so 1 is at the mouse over. It checks to see if you're mousing over a target. You can also use at focus or at target to check for a focus target or your current target's target. So that's your if statement, then. So basically, if you mouse over, then you're going to cast. And then the help is the second part of it. If not, if you're not mousing over, then number 2 will happen. Asks whether the mouse over is a friendly target, can use harm to check if it's an enemy, dead to determine if the target is dead. Most spells won't cast on them if they're dead. Okay, 2 is the kind of internal brackets. It's like, what's that doing specifically? That's basically saying if you can't do that, then this is going to happen. Will empty brackets signify a command to cast on your current target. So basically it's saying if you're not mousing over and you cast Rejuvenation, then you're going to just heal your target. We'll cast this spell if bracketed conditions are met, then 3. If not, goes back to 1. And it's not 2, then 4. If bracketed conditions are not met, we'll proceed to the next set of commands. In this case, Rejuvenation. We'll cast a spell on yourself, no target, if bracketed conditions are not met. The semicolon can also be followed by another string of conditionals. So this is basically saying, I have Rejuvenation, which is the spell right here. So I will cast Rejuvenation on a friendly mouse over target. If there isn't one, when I do this macro, I press the button, it will instead just simply cast Rejuvenation on my target if I'm not mousing over a friendly. And if I don't have a friendly target at all, I'm not targeting one, and I'm not mousing over one, it will cast it on myself. So in that case, I mean, you're still kind of focusing some, like, you're still kind of having to tab off to control this a little bit, like, oh, I suddenly want to heal myself. Well, you better make sure you're not mousing over anyone or targeting someone else for heals, which is also what would happen if you were just not using a macro. So it can't do everything. It's not like this magic silver bullet. Optimization. Once you have a target in sight, it's time to cry Bane of Havoc and let slip the Corehound Pups of War. A spell rotation helps to maximize efficiency, but nailing those actions to a macro can optimize and simplify the process. So you hypothetically could, like, let's say you go to Icy Veins or Wowpedia, you can easily look up the ideal rotation for any given situation. And you could create quite a complicated thing where you're really just pushing a button, spamming one button over and over again, which that's boring to me. According to Alexei Malafiev, who plays Dizyet on Dragon Ball US and is an Arena Junkie's content editor and accomplished pro arena player, Death Knights can enjoy a DPS boost by getting the most out of their pets. Show tooltip: Scourge Strike, Pet Attack, cast the target, pet target, harm, not dead, claw, cast Scourge Strike, start attack. So basically, let's see if I can figure out what this does. So, when you click, this is my guess, the Scourge Strike button, your pet is going to go on the attack, casting Claw once he has targeted a person, and he's going to be targeting whoever it is that you've told him to target. And then he'll do Scourge Strike and then continue to start attack. So he's going to Claw, then Scourge Strike. This macro will make you do more DPS as a Death Knight by making sure your pet spends its energy. Typically, a pet does not use up all its energy. Alexi says he also offers 2 simple but incredibly useful stacking macros. The first is for hunters. Use Aspect of the Hawk, cast Chimera Shot. Aspect of the Fox and Steady Shot are interchangeable here to create another macro. The following Paladin macro is an example of the popular tendency to match trinkets and spells with matching or similar cooldowns. Now, why would you ever have Aspect of the Hawk off if you're going to be doing that? I don't know. Unless, like, you're switching between, like, Aspect and the Monkey or something like that. Cast, or maybe if you're doing PvP and you're running with Aspect of the Cheat and you want to instantly switch. Cast Avenging Wrath, use Vicious Gladiator's Badge of Victory. Both Alexi and Jack stress that while the setup of a macro is important, its placement on the action bar, or ideally its key binding, is essential. Yeah, so all that being said, you still need to bind it to keys. Like macros, Alexi explains, key bindings can make you play your character more efficiently and faster. Instead of searching and hunting for abilities on your action bar with the mouse and keeping your attention away from battle, you can use key bindings to make keys shortcut to different abilities, allowing you to use a bigger variety of spells and abilities in most situations quicker. Most top players use extensive key bindings. So for me, for my key bindings, I set my key bindings in the order of my rotation. So, and then I do use some mods like LVY, which helps me keep track of cooldowns and, applying buffs or debuffs as needed. For an extreme example, says Jack, you probably wouldn't want your mount macro bound to Q or something like that. Think of the keyboard as a workbench, and yeah, that's normally like your strafe button. And the keys to the tools. It wouldn't make any sense to put the hammer and nails on opposite sides of the bench, so keybind accordingly. Keys can also add multiple functions by acting as modifiers. These modifiers, such as playing Alt or Control while clicking the macro, bring depth to the macro. I didn't use too many specific macro functions, says Gaka Tichondrius Udas, but I could not play without macroing multiple abilities to a single button. Gaka uses mod alt command in the following macro to indicate which spell will activate upon clicking the macro, and the show tooltip command will ensure the icon on the action bar matches the spell being cast. Show tooltip, cast, mod alt, spell name 1, spell name 2. You can string together a series of modifiers or combine them with button 1 and button 2 to bring in left and right click modifiers. Experiment with different modifiers to bring a natural logic to your game. By using modifiers, you can map a dozen spells to one key. Just make sure you remember which is which, and you're set for success. I mean, you can add so many bars. In my opinion, to me, it's not. It's not any harder than to just smartly set up your bars and know where your stuff is. In my opinion, it's really, what do you prefer to memorize? Now, sure, the actual spacing of keys apart, those fractions, microseconds, they matter at the highest levels, and that's why I'm not a pro, and I can see that. I'm just saying for myself, I don't have the good enough hand-eye coordination to have this kind of thing make enough of a difference for me. Using good key bindings and macros can make you feel like you're level 86 in the game, Alexi concludes. Okay. How do PvP and PvE macros compare? The two game styles couldn't be more different, especially when comparing something such as arenas and battlegrounds to raids. Surprisingly, though, macros for PvP and PvE are more similar than different. I think that the competitive nature of arena PvP specifically demands the player to try to be as efficient as possible. Alexi says, that's not to say that players that run dungeons should not use macros, but in a PvP situation, correct macro usage can allow a good player to do a very flashy move. For example, they could polymorph a healer, cast a damage spell on a second opponent, and counterspell it cast by a third, one after another. In PvE, nothing is scripted. PvP, nothing is scripted, so being fast and able to react to your opponent in many different situations is paramount, Jack says. In PvE, you can predict the fight for the most part, so from my perspective, PvPers get more creative and customize macros for a much wider array of situations so they can react as quickly as possible. While the motivation and drive may be different, the execution is quite similar. There are some macros that are clearly useful in either setting, Nevin explains. A popular one is the focused crowd control macro. Interrupts are another example, most recently with Chokal becoming the victim of an oft-used PvP macro. In the Chokal fight, where players in your party get converted, people have figured out macros that will quickly break that effect without having to switch targets. Cast raid 1 harm, raid 2 harm, counterspell. This PvE macro is safe to hit at any point because it would not work until people in your group are converted and become your foes. Ideally, several players with interrupts would use a similar macro in order to cover the entire raid up to raid 10 or raid 25, depending on the size of the group. It boils down to the fact that the same spells are used in raids and battlegrounds, so if it makes sense to use a PvP macro in a PvE situation, why not? A macro can save crucial seconds in the middle of a heated fight, no matter if it is a PvP battle in the Grand Arena or a raid encounter in Bastion of Twilight. Macro Lexicon, a basic guide to common macro commands. The right commands in the correct order ensure a balance of speed and efficiency. Your game's yin and yang. Long, complex macros use the same tools and follow the same rules as short, direct ones. Master these basic building blocks and you can extrapolate their rules to create almost any macro. Once you speak the language, Jim says, it's mostly a mechanical translation from a description of the behavior to the macro itself. Exactly. Cast or use executes the following spell or ability or uses an item. Target or focus, follow with a player or enemy, set it as your target action. Semicolon, breaks up commands. Strain together a series of commands and the macro will tick through them searching for the first command that can be correctly executed. Good for situational macros and harm and heal macros. Yeah. Harm, no harm, heal, dead, exists. It asks whether the target can be harmed or healed. If it's dead or exists, the latter refers to pairing it with a target or focus command. It checks to see if you have a target or focus. These conditions are useful for ensuring the correct spells are used against the appropriate targets. A nice checks and balances for mouse over. Mouse over, target of target or focus. Directs the following command at the object of your cursor is hovering over your target's target or your focus target. Mod Alt button 1. Modifiers that activate if the selected input says if I'm pressing Alt or if I click with the left button, then perform the following action. These are used to combine different actions within a single macro. Show tooltip. If there are multiple spells within a macro, the icon in your toolbar will show the one currently being cast. If you follow this with a specific spell like show tooltip Sinister Strike, the icon will only show that spell, helpful for monitoring cooldowns. Start attack. Melee DPS should consider including this in macros so their white hits begin immediately and not after the macro completes its commands. Gotcha. I'm thinking of things like Heroic Strike for that. %T, %F. Useful in chat and emote macros. This command will be replaced by the name of the target or focus. Mod Alt, Mod Control versus Mod Alt, Mod Control. Those are semicolons. Oh, I see. They're linked with a comma versus not linked. The former says if I'm holding both Alt and Control. The latter says if I'm holding either Alt or Control. Default question icon. When creating a new macro, leave the icon as the default question. The macro will select the appropriate icon based on the commands. No more endless searching for icons. That's cool. I didn't know that. Many of the macros that this is getting specific discussed have uses across classes and across PvE, PvP, and raid battlefields, but sometimes a macro is useful for just one specific occasion. For some players, chicken was their first macro, a useful tool for obtaining the Cluck Alliance quest, which leads to the Westfall chicken pet. Some, such as Nevin, will never forget endlessly clicking a Wart Begone macro to complete the Argent tournaments, a blade fit for a champion daily quest. Often, these are simple macros that are great places to start for players unfamiliar with macros. However, they can also be more complex. The Tainted Core macro holds nostalgic value for me, says Markelius, Shadow Council US, a good old Lady Vaj script. Use Tainted Core, yell Tainted Core to whoever, say Tainted Core to whoever, script, send chat message, you have the core, whisper, nil, unit name, target. So this is a macro to basically kind of what like Deadly Boss Mobs has baked in. Again, so you don't need this as much. Macros can even make some choices for you based on the current situation. Want a one-button macro that will summon a swimming, flying, or regular mount based on where you are in the world? Try Cast Swimming Abyssal Seahorse, Flyable Violet Protodrake, Turbo Strider, and substitute your mounts of choice. This will cycle through the three options and stop when one of the criteria, swimming, flyable, or neither of those, is met. This works great for mounts, but remember that the more commands you pile into the macro, the less control you have. That's actually pretty useful. A cast sequence casts one spell but changes which spell that is every time it completes one, Neville explains. Warlocks could use cast sequence reset 5, Haunt, Curse of Exhaustion. This would cast Haunt on the first click, then Curse of Exhaustion on the second. After 5 seconds, it resets so that the next click restarts at Haunt. That's what the 5 at the end. That's cool. Cast sequences are okay if you're killing trash and you don't have to worry about performing your best, but using them in your main rotations will almost always impair your play output. I compare it to driving a car with an automatic transmission versus one with a manual transmission. The automatic is easier for beginners and requires less attention, but the manual gets better performance when handled by a driver who understands when to shift. The only way the automatic actually helps you is when your understanding of how it works is so limited that the gearbox knows more about shifting than you do. It's a good analogy. Macros are tools that provide customizable control over how you interact with Azeroth. They don't perform miracles, but they do let you turn knowledge and experience into results. As Alexi reminds us, the one thing macros can't do for you is play the game. You still got to do that by yourself. Must have macros. This is a long article on macros. They're really milking the macros here. Death Knight, script, pet dismiss, cast, raise dead. Useful if your ghoul is feared somewhere useless. This macro dismisses your pet and immediately summons another. Druid, cast form 1, maul, form 3, claw. Whether you're a bear or a cat, this macro ensures you do damage. Hunter, cast trap launcher, cast explosive trap, maximize your traps in one click. Mage /2, selling portals to Stormwind 10G. Takes away much of the drudgery from trying to make a quick profit on transportation services. Paladin, cast, target, mouse over exists. Cleanse. Will keep your current target while helping out another friend. I don't know that I'd ever pay 10 gold to go to Stormwind. Maybe now in retail. Priest, cast resurrection, say maybe %T won't stand in the fire next time. Why just res when you can res and give a handy life lesson? Oh, or just a troll. Rogue, target mouse over, target cast pickpocket. Good for the rogue who's moving through a crowd. Shaman, cast nature's swiftness, cast healing wave. When you need to heal right away, pressing one button instead of two can make a huge difference. Warlock, cast mouse over harm, fell flame. While spamming fell flame on an enemy, pick off a wandering threat with a sneak attack. Warrior, show tooltip defensive stance, cast defensive stance, equip weapon, equip shield. Replace weapon and shield with specific gear. If you are DPSing as a warrior, it's always a good thing to be prepared to tank something at a moment's notice. That's actually a good idea because it could have you essentially switch your sets. As you switch your stances, you also switch your weapons. That's pretty cool. I usually try to keep those weapons on hand, but that's a pretty good one. All right, macro basics. This is, I think, probably the end of this article. Anyone can copy and paste a macro they find on a website, and that's a great stepping stone into using macros. But if you're ready to build your own, there are a few things to know. First, it's important to understand what a macro is and is not. The most basic part, Jack explains, is to understand that macros work on slash commands. So if you're using commands such as laugh or dance, you can write a macro. A macro is a few commands or a complex command, says Nevin, but that you could type into the chat line. It puts these commands into a form that you can put on an action bar or attach a keyboard to. When you hit the macro, all of the commands are run at the same time. That's why you can't use a macro to cast several spells or abilities one after the other, for the same reason that you can't cast 3 spells one after the other by hitting all 3 buttons at once. While all commands are run at once, macros are generally written as a logical progression of commands. Just as the placement of symbols, plus, equals, squared, drive a mathematical equation that leads to a conclusion, each command plays against the others and leads the macro to an end result. If you read through a macro, for help with reading a macro and the commands, reference the sidebar on page 70. Think about each command taking effect and how it will affect the following and preceding commands. Look at the following macro as a sentence or a mathematical equation. Target whoever you're mousing over, and then it will cast Sinister Strike. So basically you hover your mouse, click, hover, click. To me, I feel like that's, if you're quick with the tabs, who cares? There are 4 commands within this macro and each one relies on the other. As a conversation, it could read, what's your target? The thing my mouse is hovering over. Where are you going to cast? What are you going to cast on that target? Sinister Strike. Perhaps the easiest place to begin is to take a spell and add an emote or a chat line. Emotes and chats don't carry many rules with them, so the room for error is minimal when using them in a macro. Nevin calls these flavor macros. I think of all the flavor macros I've seen, my favorite was a resurrection macro that added the line %T, so that your target will be getting back up shortly. Please have shotgun ready in case of zombie. Here, Nevin uses %t as a variable. The macro will fill in the name of whatever target T he reses. In its entirety, the macro would read, cast resurrection, say %t will be getting back up shortly, please have shotgun ready in case of zombie. After you have a basic macro, you can build on it by adding additional commands, modifiers, or conditionals. Take the above macro and just for fun, add a targeting command or a mod alt modifier. The most important thing is to start trying, Alexi says. Trying is 90% of the work. And that's honestly, in my experience, when I've made my own macros, that's what it is. You just keep playing with it till it works and does what you want. You want to test the macro to make sure you don't wipe a raid or get your team killed before using it at prime time, says Jack. Duel someone or find a boar outside of Warcraft. There are lots of ways to test it, right? And this is the kind of macro menu. It's really actually super user-friendly. All right, so that really took a long time. It looks like the next one is going to be a full-on raid review of, what, Blackrock Depths. Maybe a redo of it. So the heights of the depths, and that's what we'll do next time. But we're done with this one. We have another episode in the pipe, 5x5. Thank you for learning about macros with me, and for getting a snippet of what could have been a cool comic series. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time on Lore of Warcraft.